Good morning, everyone. We're going to give it about 1 minute to let some additional people join, and then we'll get started. All right, let's get started. Appreciate everybody joining us today. My name is Joshua Bartolome. I'll be going through and working with my co-workers here, Chance Caldwell, Max Gannon, and we will be talking about some predictions that we have within this the cyber threat phishing landscape. So what we're going to do, go through the obligatory about Cofense to kind of give you a quick blip as to who we are and what we do. Each of us here, as well as our CEO, Mark Olson, have come up with two predictions within 2026 that we expect to see, I should say, in 2026. So we're going to talk about those predictions as well as open up for some Q&A. Next slide, please. So, by way of introductions, I'm Josh Bartolome. I'm the VP of Global Threat Services and the CSO here at Cofense, and I'm joined with Max Gannon, who is the manager of our intelligence analyst operations, and Chance Caldwell, who's our senior director of our Phishing Defense Center, which is our managed services. So, we have a nice panel of experts here that we hope will provide some insight into what we're seeing and what we expect in 2026, as well as the ability of addressing any questions anybody that's on this call today has. So, who is Cofense? For those that aren't familiar, Cofense has actually been around for since about 2012. We were originally PhishMe, and we were the pioneers of phishing security awareness and training within the cybersecurity space. We were the first ones to actually come up with it. And over the years, we've evolved to maintain our uniqueness in actually building out and adapting to the phishing threat landscape. And as it stands right now, we offer a range of targeted technologies, automations, and a full end-to-end portfolio that is nothing but focused on phishing threats and your ability of responding, mitigating, and remediating them. On average, within Cofense, specifically within Chance's group, actually, one malicious email is identified every 42 seconds. On average, using our technology from the point of identification of a phishing attack, the threats can be remediated in less than 60 seconds. And with our training, security awareness training, over the years, we've learned a lot of different things and what works and what doesn't, specifically leveraging, templates that are real phishing attacks that you're seeing within your organization and real-time targeted training. Through our training work, we've been able to get our customers to basically reduce their risk by 75% of employees clicking on links. That being said, let's get on to our predictions here, if we can. Next slide, please. So, unfortunately, Mark was not able to join us today, so I'm going to walk through his predictions. Now, what one note here, obviously, we're trying to keep the slides light, so it's more of a discussion, if you will. But at the end of this conversation, at the end of this webinar, there will be some links for an ebook that actually provides more detail into each of these predictions and some of the remediation recommendations our experts have. So first, for Mark, human AI partnership will define cyber resiliency. Now, what does that mean? From what Mark is seeing in his purview and talking with other leaders across, the world, really, is that there is that push right now for kind of reducing staff for AI within security operations. And the concern here overall is just like with anything, there has to be a balance. So you have to, while AI is important and can actually add a lot of value to a SOC operations, you have to temper it with human analysts. The threat landscape's changing fast. It's really moving quickly, and a lot of times AI, it's moving so dynamically that standard AI pattern recognition and extrapolation might not be able to keep up. So having trained experts, actual analysts, people that can go through and understand the context, look for the anomalies, perform threat hunting, is kind of the key here. Now, leverage AI to clean out the noise, really, is what Mark's kind of preference, or not preference, prediction is here is the requirement. So with that, also, it's AI transparency and governance will be a hot topic. We're already seeing this. The reality is, we all have the security questionnaires we're sending to our vendors, or if you're a vendor, you're getting the security questionnaires asking about what your policies, what your procedures, what your training criteria, what your aggregate data policy, things along those lines. So that's going to just continue to kind of increase over 2026, especially as we get more and more into AI usage and kind of the reduction of the human, if you will, which is the pattern we're seeing. And the counter to that is just like we did 20 years ago, right, where we had to bring cybersecurity up to the board level. AI is of the scope that we need to bring that to the board level. So that way there's board visibility, centralized AI governance, and policies from the top down. So that way all organizations, including vendors, can maintain transparency, can maintain documentation as to how their AI works end to end. And that's the only way we can help. That's the only way as a practitioner you can protect yourself and kind of know where your gaps are and what levels of trust to give certain technologies. Next slide, please. So I have a couple of my own predictions as well, based on my purview. So you'll find that there's a theme as we kind of go through some of these things. AI is great. We leverage it ourselves, personally and professionally, but there's obviously always that line we want to walk. And what we're going to run into, my very strong opinion, because we're already seeing it, is we're going to experience that automation paradox, which is actually this is kind of similar to Mark's prediction. You kind of see this theme here. We're all thinking alike based on what we're seeing. And that's we're going to automate more and more, which I'm a huge proponent of. Anybody that knows me or talked with me knows that automation to me is key. Remove the noise so your analyst can analyze. My concern here, or my prediction, is that the automation will start to exceed the level of trust and confidence, and the reduction of analysts is going to kind of lead into that impact of it. Again, it goes back to what Mark was saying as well, in that context is key. Human analysts have context. Automate the noise, automate the enrichments, automate the extrapolations, use AI. Absolutely. But invest in analyst expertise. That's going to be critical. Threat actors are changing way too fast for AI to keep up for end-to-end security. Human in the loop, absolutely essential. Excuse me. Oh, I just stabbed myself in the eye. Apologies. And build redundancy. What if the AI goes down? What if the AI has hallucinations? What if it's not giving you accurate data? You have to make sure that you have that staff that knows that's not right, or that needs to be fixed, or that might be a problem. So again, trust but verify. I mean, it's a tenet of security we've been talking about for many, many years. And with that, sorry, apologies. Um, with that leads to my next point, which is the timeline for phishing threat campaign execution, from compromise to, well, from initiation to compromise. It's going to shrink. I mean, it's already been shrinking. In the last year, we've already seen that dwell time of an attacker getting into actually, actions on intent for them compromising a mailbox, lateral movement, data exfiltration has already been shrinking, shrinking, shrinking. Now, with the advent of threat actor AI, malicious AI, which they are absolutely using, we see the evidence of that every single day. The point of email, malicious email, phishing email, or other phishing tactic through other communication methods, Teams, Slack, how have you. Initial deployment, compromise, and then lateral movement and data exfiltration is shrinking. We were actually predicting that's going to get into a less than a 1 hour window, whereas a lot of times they'll get in, they'll do some initial activity, the threat actors do some initial activity, and then they'll kind of just let it sit for a little bit or try to, create some other bastion host, beachheads, if you will, throughout the network enterprise. Now we're expecting and already starting to see threat actors immediately acting, immediately finding, and immediately exfiltrating data, or propagating further compromises within a target environment. Mind you, not all of this is doom and gloom, right? And you're going to hear that all of our predictions are going to sound like doom and gloom, but they're not. It's just pragmatic approach to security. So this goes back to what we've talked about, already with Mark's slide and the prior slide. It all comes down to trust but verify. For this, integrate real-time phishing threat intelligence. Strengthen human detection. Use real training of real threats, not the things that you used 10 years ago. Build layer detection that filters out the noise. Use indicators of compromise filtering to get the noise out of there. Then look for anomalies, and then have threat hunting groups or teams or individuals, or leverage comparative technologies. Is really the way we're going to need to stay ahead of this because unfortunately, prediction boils down to threat actors are going to start getting fast and furious on victims, organizations. That being said, I'm going to pass this over to Max so Max can go through his predictions. Max?
Thank you. So, context is really key, especially to my team. But I predict that context is going to become basically the only defense that we have against modern phishing. So, to give you some context on why, most traditional email security tools they do some, scanning of, the content of the email, the subject, etc. But really, what it comes down to most is scanning the embedded URLs. That's the core focus of what they do. So threat actors are starting to use things like open redirects with Google, link shorteners with Bitly, and having actual legitimate pages on Microsoft Forms and other places that host links to credential phishing. So they're doing all kinds of things like this. Increasingly, it's becoming easier to do them with AI too. And as a result, a lot of traditional email security defenses are failing. AI ones are doing better, but they're still definitely having a lot of problems. So because of this, the context is really becoming important. You need to know not just, here's a URL that might be bad, but, here's all this associated information with the URL. Here's the next stage. Here's what to look for in your defenses to see if one of your employees clicked a link. You need to find all of this associated information to be able to fully detect the threat. And this is especially important now with a lot of the remote access tool abuse that we're seeing. And Chance will go into a little bit more detail, but context is basically the only way to identify those. So, could you actually go back one? Thank you. So the next one is actually a little bit different. As I'm sure most of y'all know, CVEs are publicly displayed. All of these specific details of how to exploit them aren't there, but for a lot of the more popular ones, people have released tools on GitHub and a lot of other places that let you exploit them. So what this particular one means is that threat actors are going to find these CVEs and they're going to say, okay, well, what if I just slightly adjust the exploitation of this so that it gets around the actual CVE, but still takes advantage of the core problem. So people have done this in the past to great effect. But with AI, it's going to become easier and easier to simply iterate over slight variations of a known CVE until threat actors find something that works. So this iteration is something that takes a lot of time for a human to do. But if it's automated and if you use AI for it, it's quick and easy, and it's going to become even more popular. So I predict we're also going to start seeing this with email security defenses. Threat actors are going to say, okay, using a Google redirect in this way bypasses these defenses. So I'm going to iterate and I'm going to say, okay, well, they've adjusted to defend against that. What if I just slightly adjust this URL or do this one other thing? So they're going to find these methods that bypass email security defenses and they're going to iterate over them. They're going to do slight variations until it's almost impossible to defend against all the different ways that they're bypassed. All right, now I'm going to hand this off to Chance to give you a little bit more information. Oh,
So actually, I apologize. I'd like to interject. I completely failed as my in my host duties. I forgot to mention to everybody that's attending, if you have any questions for any of our presenters about any of our premises or anything regarding this topic, please use the Q&A function within Zoom here, and we'll address those at the end of this conversation. Apologies, didn't mean to take your time, Chance. Go ahead.
Oh, good. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Josh. So my first prediction today is really that AI is going to turn oversharing into phishing bait. And so what that means is that, as employees and as people and as organizations, we have a lot of information out on the internet, right? We've got social media posts, we have LinkedIn posts, we have organizational charts out there. And what that is going to allow is for threat actors to use AI to scrape your information, your organization's information, across the web and use that information to create highly targeted, highly, you know, personal email campaigns for you and your employees. You know, I'd say a couple years ago or even 2 years ago, most phishing campaigns were very generic. They're for the widespread. They don't have the time to make emails for each individual. But with AI technologies today, they're able to create high, highly targeted, massively sent emails, and they don't have to put a lot of effort in themselves to make them targeted. And so the more information that you have out there, the more they're going to be able to use that information to target you. We've seen that on a smaller scale this year already. If anyone saw it, there was a decent sized campaign this year seen across industries where threat actors were actually scraping individuals' addresses from the internet, using those addresses to pull Google Maps images of what's supposed to be those people's houses, and then adding that to their threats to make them, that more convincing for the user. You see, oh, that is my house. Yeah, they must really have information on me or access to my, computer, whatever it is. And so that style of using your information to make it targeted is going to blow up over the next year. And so, one of the things we say about this is to make sure that you are being proactive about what information you and the organization have out there. Limit what you're putting out there. And as an organization, be proactive in seeing what is out there, making sure that information like organizational charts are not available if you do not want them to be, and be prepared to see attacks that are not just, hey, you, it's going to be directly targeted to you and your individuals, and it's going to make them that more convincing. And the second prediction is that remote access abuse will increase in 2026. And so Max was talking a little bit about remote access Trojans or rats. And this prediction is really just that abuse of legitimate access tools is going to continue into the next year. This year, we saw an explosion of rats. That has been our number one used malware for the Phishing Defense Center, or not used, but seen by the Phishing Defense Center. And we expect that to continue to grow. And so, why are remote access Trojans so widely used now? It's because they are misusing legitimate tools, right? Your IT teams probably use some form of remote access tools to gain access to your employees' computers. You need to make changes, to provide support, etc. And so they can use these legitimate tools in illegitimate ways to get access to your employee's computer. They can, get them to download a number of these remote access tools and get access. And your security systems are probably not stopping them today because they see them as legitimate tools. So instead of spending time creating all these new tools and malware samples, they can just use legitimate access, have quick and easy access to all of your employees, and not have to put a lot of effort into it. So one thing that we are advising is, as an organization, you should look at what remote access tools that you actually use and blocking all other remote access tools. You don't want to make a wide open landscape that they can use to get access. And if you're not using them, you don't need to allow them. And, beyond that, make sure that you're reinforcing, just the fundamental security controls, strengthening multi-factor, domain monitoring, email warning systems, etc. Um, with both of these things, the rats and the, oversharing, these things are not, you know, the big thing here is that they're going to explode the number of phishing emails you're seeing. They're going to explode the context that you're seeing. And so it's really important to continue evaluating, pushing security controls and fundamentals to all your employees. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Chance. So as we lean in, I'm going to give everybody a chance here to think of some. If you have any questions, please again post them into the Q&A section. But kind of wanted to do a little bit of a roundtable here. So one I wanted to lead in. Obviously, as you look through and hear our predictions, I want to stress that we're definitely not anti-AI. We're all kind of seasoned security professionals, and we live by that mantra of trust but verify. Um, AI has a place without questions. Again, we leverage it ourselves. Leverage it myself personally and professionally, as do, Max, Chance, and a lot of individuals in a lot of different organizations around the world. And it boils down to, 2025 was the year of AI, really, right? 2026 is going to be the year of balancing AI. If I had to kind of sum it up, even everything that we've kind of talked about really comes down to a mixture of, within your security operations center, AI is going to be important, but don't over rely. Trust but verify. Context is key. Human analysts can bring that context. Kind of just putting it out there then, Max. Obviously you went through your predictions, but out of the gate, what do you think the biggest pain point coming into 2026 is going to be based on what you're seeing? And that could be a technical, hard or soft control.
I think the biggest issue is that threat actors are honestly becoming better at finding and exploiting methods to bypass email security controls. There's a lot of tools out there that make it very easy to automate creation of, uh, different methods of obscuring URLs to make them bypass filters. And I expect that, instead of it being, I don't know, like 30% of advanced campaigns using these tools, it's going to start to be almost all of them because it's going to be baked into the AI-based tools that threat actors use. Because more and more of them are using kits. It's just not cost effective to make these campaigns yourself anymore. If they want to maintain their market share, they can't continue to do these manually. And as they continue to automate, they're going to continue to use these different methods that bypass traditional defenses. Um, and AI can definitely help a lot in that space, but there's also still a lot of things that bypass the AI-based security email controls. So I think, as I mentioned with my prediction on context, I think it's really going to be key that we find different ways of getting around this. So, this is going to be needing people to reverse engineer the ways that threat actors bypass all of the different security defenses, and it's going to need for people to find ways to automate reverse engineering these methods that threat actors are using.
Absolutely. That's great information. So, Chance, from your purview, is heading up our managed services. I mean, you see a lot of things in real time. Is it true or is it overblown that I'm trying to think of the right wording here. There's that shift where attacks are pivoting and just the scale of them is becoming unwieldy, if you will, of new tactics, new payloads, new contexts, scam emails as an example, that um, they're becoming faster and more diverse comparative to what we've seen over 2025 and prior years.
100%. I mean, like you said, my team, we see things real time across industries of what's going on. And that really is the big thing is that scale is becoming a killer for organizations. Security teams are not able to keep up. Security tools are not able to keep up because the tactics, the payloads, like you said, are changing minute by minute and person by person. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, phishing attacks used to be very generic, widespread, whereas now it's targeted per person, and that is making it difficult to keep up. The attacks themselves, you know, I would say, attacks used to stay up for maybe 48 hours, right? These days, they're changing and they're down and they're changing payloads every 10 minutes these days, if that. Sometimes it's every couple of minutes or minutes. And that's because of the AI tools, as we've talked about, making it easy to switch movement, to pick and choose who they send things to. And that's only going to continue, right? As those tools evolve, as their knowledge of how to use those tools it's only going to evolve. And I think that's where the important conversation comes up of, well, should I just be using AI to detect these tools, right? Or to detect these threats? And yes, but you also have to have that human element, as we talked about, right? It's a circular loop. You have to have the AI catching the easy things so that your humans can actually work on the difficult threats that are coming through, to then feed information to the AI to train them to take, the easy stuff away, and then continue allowing the humans to work on the new threats that are out there. So yes, 100%. volume, tailoring of emails is going to be huge, not only now, but going forward.
So
That's
I also want to break in with that one. Something to definitely consider with that is, as Chance said, they're recycling these email templates. So going from one thing to the next so quick. So that means that the stuff from a year ago, I mean, even like 6 months ago, is out of date and you don't see it anymore. So if you've got SIMs and you're basing them on emails that are older than 6 months, they're not useless, but they're not anything near what people actually see anymore. Like
right.
they just recycle things so fast, you've got to keep that sort of thing up to date, or it's just not going to be effective.
No, that's a great point for both of you. I appreciate that insight here. And I do want to call out too. I mean, it sounds like we're anti-AI, but we absolutely aren't. Like, I've kind of stressed that because I want to make sure that we're not putting out that we have a bias or anything of that imagination. AI absolutely has its usage. The one thing that I meant to mention, I apologize, because Mark Olson, our CEO, is really big on this, as are the rest of us, really. When it comes to AI, one of the big mechanisms that we have to make sure as security practitioners is that we understand what the AI is doing, how is it making its determination, and more importantly, why it's making its determination. I believe the phrase now that's starting to be coined is explainable AI. So, what's its thought pattern. Now, you know, why is that useful? Because again, if you're leveraging AI, even in just an automation capacity, you want to know why it made a decision. Because if it made a wrong decision, you need to be able to account for it and identify it, and then potentially either retrain it or mitigate it or talk to your vendor, or if it's something you built yourself, to kind of do some retraining. But what we're seeing too, especially with the questionnaires that we've put out to our vendors and that we've gotten from our customers, right? They want to know, how does the AI work? How does it make its decisions? What is its weighting criteria? What is its training set? What is its retraining? I think as we go into 2026, we're talking about AI here. We need collectively in the information security space better governance of AI. You can't stop it, right? I mean, the teams are using it whether you want them to or not. It's everybody that's ever done security operations knows that there's the standards and policies handbook, and then there's what the analysts are actually doing. It's a Venn, it's not a full overlay up, right? I've managed multiple SOCs over the years, and I can say that with confidence. And the other thing I want to stress too here is, this is the same premise. If you've been in security for a while, I've been in security for over 27 years now. And this same conversation, this same hype, if you will, happened when log aggregation technologies came out in the early 2000s, when SIEMs came out in the mid 2000s, and they were hot and heavy. It's going to cure everything that you need. Companies were investing millions of dollars into SIEMs and reducing SOC staff. And that didn't, and then that was a bubble that kind of popped. And then it was SOARs, automate everything on the back end, and then you don't need as many analysts. Well, the problem was is those SOARs need to be managed. The context of each of these dynasties of cybersecurity, if you will, is trust but verify and have humans and experts in the loop, right? Because context, all automation needs context. AI needs context. If it needs trust, go through your AI, go through the vendors that have AI that you have, and test it, verify it, quantify it, add value, or identify where it adds value and where it might be a little bit lacking. Excuse me. So that being said, we do have a couple of questions here that we're going to start fielding. And again, if there's anybody on this call has any questions, please hit us up on the Q&A. We're more than happy to talk about anything you ask. So the first question is, what are your concerns with AI implementations, especially in contrast to GDPR and NIS2 requirements? Um, I'll lead in with this, and then obviously Max and Chance, if you have any comments, please jump in. To me, those requirements are all about visibility and understanding and documentation. What data, where's the data, how is it handled, and how do you identify where it's used and how do you scrub it? What's your definitions of aggregate data and AI training? How is it sanitized, redacted, all that fun stuff. Uh, to me, the paperwork needs to catch up. Overall for the documentation of how AI models are trained, and I'm talking broadly, how AI models are trained, and kind of some of the decision tree, the retraining cycles, and what data is used. Um, Additionally, you'd want to make sure that if you're a vendor, you document, what your training data set is, what's the steps and processes you use for sanitation, aggregate data collection, exclusion, inclusion of data, requirements and policies. If you're, excuse me, an individual, a customer, or I should say an organization that's leveraging AI, external AI services, those are the questions you should be asking. And those questions help actually marry and map to GDPR, NIS2, ISO, NIST 853, all these other different regulations and requirements. And I think as it stands now, organizations, makers of AI are, I don't want to say backstepping, but they are absolutely going back and now trying to build these mapping models for compliance. And when I say models, I mean diagrams, not AI models. But mapping compliance requirements and compliance details to how in their AI so they can actually do some alignment on those policies. Max, Chance, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so there's no real nice way to put it, but several large AI companies have a history of basically lying about whether or not the data you feed them goes public. So you just can't trust that. So if you're feeding your models any kind of PII that cannot, under any circumstances, go public, you have to be very, very careful because you can't trust when they say, yeah, this doesn't go public. You can't trust it no matter what they say because it's been shown several times that when they say that, they might not even be aware of the fact that it's going public because
That's a good
a
point.
lot of people don't have full insight into their models. So you've got to assume that whatever you feed it is eventually going to become public and be very careful with what you feed it.
Yeah, great point. Chance, any thoughts?
No, you both covered it exactly what I was thinking. And that information that's going to those AI tools could also lead to them using what we talked about earlier as context for phishing down the line as well, because they now have that information in the model. Those same models are going to be used in phishing creation and be able to be more targeted.
No, that's a great point. And that actually leads to something that the three of us have talked about a fair amount over the last couple months, where we've been seeing what we've been extrapolating. It appears that a lot of these threat actors are actually pulling breach data, right? And actually using that to train their model. So when we're talking breach data, we're talking where there's ransomware, exfiltration of emails or payloads or infrastructure documentation, and using that data to create models that actually can generate emails that have the same vernacular as the customer or that continue a conversation that they were never a part of, things along those lines. Do you guys expect that we're going to see more of that, I guess, operationalization of not, I mean, we're already seeing it obviously with the social media, like we were talking about kind of leveraging all that, but for actual operationalization of breach data among threat actors? I mean, usually breach data and then it's extortion or they're trying to sell it back to people. But do you see that there's probably going to be more of an ecosystem on the back end for using it for training?
I think it depends on how effective it is, more than anything else, because that's what drives threat actors, if what they're doing effectively gets into inboxes. And I think, unfortunately, it's shown so far to be highly effective. So I think we can expect to see a lot more of it,
So it's the gift that keeps on giving.
unfortunately.
James, any?
Every piece of information they can get, I think they're going to be using to build profiles for individuals,
Yeah,
and that's going to be a big one, right? I mean, if they're actually pulling data from a breach, that is going to be potentially useful information that people would think, oh, no one is going to know that, but they do,
yeah,
unfortunately.
that's fair. And I'll say, again, I feel that there's AI. I'm a big fan of contextual AI for, primary purpose versus broad AI that's supposed to try to do everything. Because then you can actually control your data, you control your training. And for organizations and even for cybersecurity companies, right, making sure that you're using the right data for training makes a lot of sense. So there is actually, not to take a line from the threat actors, but there is actually something to be said about being able to leverage AI or to build models, AI models based on data for a customer to build their own models to, kind of identify anomalies and things along those lines. But I think to your point, obviously we're talking about threat actors here, so they're not going to tell us their secret sauce. But from AI as a whole, that's why that context, that insight as to how decisions are made or why decisions are made makes a lot more sense. And my opinion is a single, kind of point purpose AI in regards to security warrant or security operations is preferable because it's better trained, more targeted training on the scope and the concept that you're focusing on versus, and I'm not bashing, I've used it, I like it. Yeah, using generalized chat GPT for, is this a bad thing? Versus using a targeted and trained AI. Are you guys, am I wrong?
Yes, so I
Yes, I'm
gave
wrong.
sorry. I
No, you're
agree very
fine.
much. Somebody gave me an example a bit ago. They said they built their own not super great model, and then they took 2 years of emails from their company and they trained their model specifically on their own data for 2 years. And their model was way more effective than any of the
Yeah.
products that they tested because they built it based off of exactly what they had seen and nothing else. And I think that's really the key is if you're going to use AI for any of your security stuff, you have to make sure it's based on what you see and not what somebody in adjacent sectors might see, because what your company sees is always going to be different from what other people see.
Yep. Volume, scale, and
Mm.
context. Absolutely. Chance?
I think it's also important just to add, we get a lot of questions about, well, which emails are AI? How many emails are AI? And I think the real answer is they're all AI in some form or fashion. They are using some tool along the line that is using AI to help, whether that is, just pulling who's in an organization, or if it's actually writing the emails or sending the emails, at least some part of it is using some kind of AI tooling in their process these days.
No, and that's
So
a great point. We get that a lot, and I apologize, Max, but we do get that a lot. And generative AI detection's obviously a heck of a lot easier from an image because you could do palette density analysis. You can look at pixel density analysis, excuse me, or palette anomalies outside of even visual. But if you're looking at 5 sentences in an email that are in perfect language vernacular, how do you know if that's AI or not? There's no real indicators to your point, Chance. Sorry, Max, I cut you off there.
So previously, like a year or more ago, we would see a decent number of emails that would have dear and then in brackets username. And it was obviously an email template the threat actor used, and they just put in the username of whoever the recipient was. And they'd have little other parts in brackets in the email body that were supposed to be customized. So when you see that, it's very obvious that a threat actor is using a template that gets auto-filled. So we don't really see that hardly at all anymore because they're not using those basic templates. They're only using the things that generate a full, detailed, customized email per person.
No, that's a great point.
And
Um,
and I think we've seen that biggest or the most in BECs or business email compromises, right?
yeah.
Like you still get some BECs where they're not the most well put together, but the majority of them have gotten so much more advanced in actually having the correct person's name on it, using the correct organization. Used to be they would be all over the place. You'd sometimes have the wrong person's name on it. The organization was wrong. The this and that were wrong. Nowadays, they're a lot more organized. They're actually using correct information, and that is only going to grow and be more specific to the organization.
And I think it's important to call out too here, as we're seeing this, especially with the advent of threat actor AI, it's not just locking it down to businesses. I always look at it as like I have myself, I'm like, my own person, and then so I have my personal persona, and then I have my work persona, right? Just for way of conversation. So, but it's not these threats aren't just locked down now to the work personas. A quick example, 3 years ago, I got promoted to VP here at Cofense. About a week after I got promoted, I started getting some phishing emails saying, "Hey, I talked to you. Congratulations. Do you remember me?" Type of. Some of them were BEC, some of them were scams, some of them were crayfish. But it took about a week, right? This past January, I got named as the CSO for Cofense. Less than an hour. I had at least 5 emails in my inbox that were absolutely fish. Uh, um, and and I had a surge of emails in my personal mailboxes that were also fish. I think that kind of highlights the differences that we've seen over the last couple of years to what we're starting to see more and more. Because that infers to me, whether it was they were monitoring LinkedIn, whether they were monitoring the Cofense's senior management page, or how have you, for in January, they were immediately able to identify a change in organizational hierarchy and immediately built targeted fish because these weren't run-of-the-mill fish. These were very geared towards me, and they looked like they were from vendors. They looked like they were from past colleagues, things along those lines. And even personally, it was, I own a couple of domains. And after some research and kind of diving into it, there was some correlation between the campaigns on my side. I was getting emails about, hey, your domain's being blocked. Click here to fix it. And it looked exactly like the registrar I use. So I think we're seeing that blend more and more now as well. So threat actors are leveraging everything they can. That being said, that we do actually we have time for one last question here. And this did just came in, and I think this applies to what I was just talking about they're doing a lot more living off the land and fast iteration. Why are remote access tools a heavy focus for use, and why are they so hard to detect? Max, I'll start with you on that one.
So the biggest reason is that the binaries and executables are signed. They have a valid signature. So most tools look for unsigned binaries because that's, decent indicator. But these are signed, valid signatures. So when anything looks at them, they go, okay, this is completely legitimate. And a lot of them, their network connections go to completely legitimate places. And the only actual malicious part is that when they go to the legitimate site, they also send a key saying this is so and so threat actor who's remotely accessing it. But none of that appears in network traffic. All you see in network traffic is connections to a legitimate website. So there's no way to detect the binary. The network communications are completely legitimate. There's basically no way to know that it's malicious other than context because in a lot of cases, companies and their IT teams, as Josh mentioned earlier, will use things that aren't necessarily in the handbook. So your IT team may use ConnectWise to connect to their employees' computers, and that may not be 100% documented. So whenever their tools come in and scan and they see ConnectWise, they're like, oh, that's us. And there's no indications to the contrary anywhere. So it's almost impossible to really tell if there's something malicious there. And we've been seeing a meteoric increase in these and the use of legitimate files overall.
James, any final thoughts on that or anything else?
No, just go back to what I said earlier, that this is why it's important to make sure that you're documenting, like Max said, the tools that you're using and ensuring that if you're not using these remote access tools, that you block them if you can to make sure that they cannot be used for malicious purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll close it off. I mean, if we had to summarize everything, it's really been the security operations and risk mitigation mantra forever, trust but verify. Is really what we all have to make sure we do. Let's not buy into the hype. Let's ask questions, but trust and verify. That being said, we really appreciate everybody's time attending this call today, this webinar. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Cofense. As mentioned, the ebook regarding these predictions and some more additional data will be posted on our website very shortly. And again, appreciate everybody's time and hope everybody has a fantastic day. Thank you.